Good afternoon. On this day of immense national pride, Ramakrishan Mission Residential College Autonomous Narendrapur welcomes you to a very special program to celebrate the 75th Independence Day of our beloved country, India. This is also our humble homage to the brave and holy souls that freed us from the cruel clutches of British colonizers. Now, what we have really done with that political independence is a matter of debate, no doubt, a matter that requires self-questioning and self-reflection. How much our mind is without fear and the head is held high, as Kavi Guru says, is a matter that we should really think about. However, this is a great day, a day of perennial significance, and we express our warm greetings to all of you. And in this program, we will attempt to reflect on a very pertinent, yes, very less discussed issue, spiritual independence. To enlighten us about what it means to be independent, particularly spiritually independent, we have with us an incredible orator, Swami Sarvapriyanandaji Maharaj, head of the Vedanta Society, New York. We shall formally begin today's program with Vedic chanting by Brahmachari Shruti Chaitanya and Brahmachari Ananda Chaitanya.
Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha Harihi Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahanam Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Bhumir Bhumnadyavarinantariksham mahitva Upastite devyaritejnimannadamannadyayadate Ayangau Krishnirakramidasanan mataram punaha Pitaram cha prayansuvaha Trigum shraddham virajati vakpatangaya shishriye Pratyasya vahadyubihi Asya pranadapanatyantascharati rochana Vyakhyan mahishassuvaha Yatva akruddah parovapamanyuna yadavatya Sukalpamagne tattava punaspodipayamasi Yatte manyuparoktasya prithvi manudadvase Aditya Vishve Deva Vasavasya Samabharan Medini Devi Vasundhara Syad Vasudha Devi Vasavi Brahma Varchasa Pritrunagushotram Chakshurmanaha Devi Hiranyagarbhini Devi Prasuvari Sadane Satyayane Sida Samudravati Savitri Hano Devi Mahyangi Mahidharani Mahovyatishta Shringe Shringe Yagne Yagne Vidhishini Indrapatni Vyapini Surasaridhiha Vayumati Jalashayani Shriyam Dharaja Satyandho Parimedini Shroparidattam parigaya Vishnupatni Mahim Devi Madhavi Madhava Priyam Lakshmi Priyasakhim Devi Namam Yachyuta Vallabham Om Dhanurdharayai Vidmahe Sarva Siddhyai Cha Dhimahi Tanno Dhara Prachodayat Mahim Devim Vishnupatni Majuryam Pratichi Menagam Havishaya Jamaha त्रेधा विष्णुरुगायो विचक्रमे महेन्द्रिवं पृथिवीमन्तरिक्षम् तच्छ्रोणैतिश्रव इच्छमाना पुण्यश्लोकं यजमानाय कृण्वति ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः हरिः ॐ तत्सत् श्रीरामकृष्णार्पणमस्तु.
I would now request Swami Purnamayanandaji Maharaj of our college to harmonize this special day and this special program with a soulful opening song.
যদি তোর ডাক শুনে কেউ না আসে তবে একলা চলো রে, যদি তোর ডাক শুনে কেউ না আসে তবে একলা চলো রে, তবে একলা চলো একলা চলো একলা চলো একলা চলো রে, তবে একলা চলো একলা চলো একলা চলো একলা চলো রে, যদি তোর ডাক শুনে কেউ না আসে তবে একলা চলো রে। যদি কেউ কথা না কয় ওরে ওরে ও অভাগা, কেউ কথা না কয়, যদি সবাই থাকে মুখ ফিরায়ে সবাই করে ভয়, যদি সবাই থাকে মুখ ফিরায়ে সবাই করে ভয়, তবে পরাণ খুলে ও তুই মুখ মুখে তোর মনের কথা একলা বলো রে, ও তুই মুখ মুখে তোর মনের কথা একলা বলো রে, যদি তোর ডাক শুনে কেউ না আসে তবে একলা চলো রে, তবে একলা চলো একলা চলো একলা চলো একলা চলো রে, তবে একলা চলো একলা চলো একলা চলো একলা চলো রে, যদি তোর ডাক শুনে কেউ না আসে তবে একলা চলো রে। যদি সবাই ফিরে যায় ওরে ওরে ও অভাগা, সবাই ফিরে যায়, যদি গহন পথে যাবার কালে কেউ ফিরে না যায়, যদি গহন পথে যাবার কালে কেউ ফিরে না যায়, তবে পথের কাটা ও তুই রক্ত মাখা চরণ তলে একলা দলো রে, ও তুই রক্ত মাখা চরণ তলে একলা দলো রে, যদি তোর ডাক শুনে কেউ না আসে তবে একলা চলো রে, তবে একলা চলো একলা চলো একলা চলো একলা চলো রে, তবে একলা চলো একলা চলো একলা চলো একলা চলো রে, যদি তোর ডাক শুনে কেউ না আসে তবে একলা চলো রে। যদি আলো না ধরে ওরে ওরে ও অভাগা, আলো না ধরে, যদি ঝড় বাদলে আধার রাতে দুয়ার দেয় ঘরে, যদি ঝড় বাদলে আধার রাতে দুয়ার দেয় ঘরে, তবে বর্জনালে আপন বুকের পাঁজর জ্বালিয়ে নে একলা চলো রে, আপন বুকের পাঁজর জ্বালিয়ে নে একলা চলো রে, যদি তোর ডাক শুনে কেউ না আসে তবে একলা চলো রে, তবে একলা চলো একলা চলো একলা চলো একলা চলো রে, তবে একলা চলো একলা চলো একলা চলো একলা চলো রে, যদি তোর ডাক শুনে কেউ না আসে তবে একলা চলো রে, যদি তোর ডাক শুনে কেউ না আসে তবে একলা চলো রে।
It is now time for a formal address of welcome which will be given by the Secretary of our ashram, revered Swami Sarvapriyanandaji Maharaj. Maharaj, over to you.
It gives me immense pleasure to welcome you all on the occasion of Independence Day function organized by Ramakrishan Mission Residential College, Narendra. It's a matter of great joy and pride that country is celebrating its 75th Independence Day. Today, we especially remember the freedom fighters with great reverence for their sacrifice in order to make India free from British rule. But we had many dreams of independent India. Sorry to say that all of them are not fulfilled. Of course, India has made tremendous progress in certain sectors. In a long period of 75 years of independence of India, we could have progressed much more. Even today, basic communities of human life could not be made available to each and every citizen of the country. The question comes, why it is so? Because after independence, the spirit of nationalism started drying up from our hearts. We have no genuine love for our motherland. Unless we love our mother country, we hardly can do anything in terms of real progress. Once Swami Vivekananda was asked by his one of the intimate American lady followers how she could truly serve India. Swami Vivekananda said emphatically, love India. This shows that love for country is ultimate thing, which is the most important matter for our progress and growth. Swamiji traveled length and breadth of India and realized that the participation of youth is very much needed in rebuilding India. The younger generation can bring change in the country. That is why Swamiji emphatically said, my faith in younger generation, modern generation, out of them my workers will come and work like lion for regeneration of India. It is the responsibility of the youth to take the country forward. Let us all imbibe the spirit of patriotism to fulfill the dreams of India. Wishing India all success, progress and prosperity. Swami Sarvapriyanandaji, Minister in charge of the Vedanta Society of New York, is most welcome to deliver his lecture on the occasion of Independence Day of India. Jai Hind.
Thank you, Maharaj, for your motivating words as always. I now request Professor Dr. Chandrabhushan Roy, Head of the Department of History of our college, to deliver his address.
Namaskar, Sabaike. Today we are assembled here to celebrate the 75th Independence Day of our country. 74 years of independence completed, and we have entered into the 75th year of independence. It's time to rejoice, it's time to celebrate, it's time to commemorate and pay homage and tribute. It is time to discuss, analyze and explain our loss and gains that we made in these 7.5 decades. It's time to introspect, it's time to march ahead. The process of making India took thousands and thousands of years. The process of liberating India also took more than 100 years. The process of giving a concrete shape to the concept of Indian nationalism in modern times, it also took more than 100 years or 200 years, we can say. So, this is the time we should must remember that in this process of making, consolidating and liberating India, not one or two, hundred or thousands, but millions of Indians contributed their bit. So it is time to remember their efforts made and to pay homage and tribute to all of them, known, unknown, whoever he or she might be. It is really a privileged situation for me that I am sharing the dais with monks like Swami Sarvapriyanandaji Maharaj and Swami Sarvapriyanandaji Maharaj. Throughout the year 1921-22, we shall be organizing, launching, inaugurating thousands of projects, programs, seminars, conferences, symposiums, cultural events, workshops, collaborative schemes to mark the celebrations. And we all are going to participate in it or to be a part of it directly or indirectly. It is a great event, rather one of the greatest events of our national life. That must be celebrated, other being the Republic Day. It is time not to make self-congratulatory speeches and recount what we have achieved in various fields in these 7 decades. In reality, we should be increasingly introspective. It is time to search answers of so many whys, whats, wheres. What we could not achieve, why we failed to achieve, where are the fault lines that demand immediate corrective measures. The COVID pandemic has exposed our health system and medical infrastructure, digital divide and economic disparity, inadequate educational infrastructure and facilities. The list is long. Not even a single academic institution of our country is in the list of top 100 premier institutions of the world. As a nation, we have achieved undoubtedly a lot, but the list of our failures is longer than that list. So, most vital questions today to be asked to ourselves are, where is the problems? What are the nature of the problems? Unless until we make a strength, weakness, opportunity and threat, that is SWOT analysis, with all sincerity and utmost seriousness, without any bias and prejudices, it would not be possible to march ahead on the path of prosperity, inclusive growth and development. If I am asked to say about some of the most glaring problems that today as a nation we are facing, it can be summed up. The first problem is the problem at the lack of attitude, commitment and determination. To my mind, the second problem is that we are Indian only when we have no other option to introduce ourselves. We say I am an Indian when I don't have any option, be within inside the Indian territory or be outside the Indian territory. For last 75 years we have been perfected the art of selling illusions to our people. We have been selling illusions. The Britishers injected into the body politic of India the policy of divide and rule. I think we inherited this legacy, and for last 75 years we have been following this policy with some changes that we made in it. And the biggest blunder I think that we have committed in all these 75 years, that is reflected from history, that we have detached politics from, if I don't use English word, rather it would be easy to communicate with you if I were our own words from our own language. We have detached Rajniti from Dharma and Adhyatma. And because of this detachment of Dharma and Adhyatma from Rajniti, we have been witnessing this downfall. We have been witnessing this decline in the commitment, decline in the character, decline in the commitment to the nation. to take India on the path of progress and re-establish its rich custom and tradition, what we need to say, what we need to do is we have to bring a change in the mindset without any negativity in our thought process. Today, it is our National Independence Day celebration day, but today it is also the birthday celebration day of one of the politician turned saint philosophers of India, Maharishi Aurobindo. And when we talk about Maharishi Aurobindo, and before we pay our tribute, heartfelt tribute to Maharishi Aurobindo, I would like to mention a few things from history here. I don't know how much I would be able to reflect it. It is 1921-22, we are going to celebrate Independence Day, the 75th Independence Day throughout the year. If we go back 100 years back, in 1921-22, then history shows us that actually the path of the freedom movement came through the ashrama system. And we, the Narenpurians sitting over here, we are also the part of the ashrama system. So, the very concept of ancient ashrama that was implemented and executed in modern times, in modern India, in the opening decades of 20th century, it opened the gate of the freedom movement in more than many ways. You all, when I will say, you will all be remembering that it was this 1920-21 when 3 ashramos were set up in India for the complete spiritual transformation of the youth, for churning out political leaders, leaders of commitment, leaders of determination, leaders committed to the nation, leaders committed to sacrifice their lives for the sake of the nation, for the sake of the freedom. I talked about Maharshi. One was Maharshi, one was Mahatma Gandhi. Sabarmati Ashram was also set up in this 1920-21. And another was Gurudev. Gurudev Rabindranath Tagore, he set up his ashrama at Shantiniketan, the Vishwabharati, to produce real humans. And all these 3, Mahatma, Maharshi and Gurudev, they were inspired by and they had taken their lessons from the life and deeds of Swami Vivekananda, who started the Ramakrishna Math and Ramakrishna Mission Ashram. So these 4 ashrama, if you go back into the history, Ramakrishna Math Mission, Ramakrishna Ashram, Sabarmati Ashram, Shanti Niketan, and Pondicherry Ashram. These ashrams for the last 100 plus years have been the seat of producing youths, the men of character, who have contributed immensely in the pre-1947 period to the freedom movement and in the post-1947 towards the building of this country, India, that is Bharat. We must remember that some dangerous strains have developed in the post-independence period in India, in the field of historical studies. And we have 2 parallel trends of history, writing, history discussion, যেটাকে আমরা ইতিহাস চর্চা বলি. One is being done by the scholars, by the academicians, by the Indologists, by the researchers, by the historians, nationally and globally. And the second thing that is creating a great problem, what we the people of India, what the intellectuals, policy makers, the leaders of various political parties, the government formed by various political parties, what they should do, they should create history. They should not write history. They should not interpret history. Because interpretation and writing of history is the domain of the historians and researchers. And here, we the sincere students of history, here we the sincere people who love the country from the very core of the heart, has a role to play. We have some accountability. We have some responsibility. With these words, I would like to conclude my this short thought sharing session. Thanks to all of you for giving me a patient hearing to my words that was full of boredom. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your thought-provoking words. I now request the principal of our college, Swami Sarvapriyanandaji Maharaj, to deliver his address. Maharaj.
Om Namah Sri Yatirajaya Vivekananda Suraye Satcheti Sukha Swarupaya Swamine Tapaharine. Today, we are going to celebrate the 75th Independence Day of our Mother India. The history of our college, Ramakrishna Math and Ramakrishna Mission, and Ramakrishna Sharada Vivekananda movement as a whole has a significant linkage with the history of freedom movement of the country and also with the post-independence growth and development of India. Undoubtedly, this is a historic moment for our country, not only to rejoice, but to retrospect, not only to rewrite the old odes, but to contemplate on our past deeds, not only to portray our pleasure and pain, hope and despair, and then retire to silence, but to work hard for translating our dreams into reality. Our college is fortunate today that we have got amidst us a scholarly monk like Srimad Swami Sarvapriyanandaji, who is going to deliberate upon a unique theme that he has chosen to usher in new lives in the commemoration of this day of national importance. On behalf of Ramakrishna Mission Residential College Autonomous Narendrapur, we convey our heartfelt regards and namaskar to Sarvapriyanandaji. The struggle for freedom in the Indian context should be elucidated, keeping in mind the perennial ethos of the country. Ordinarily, historical studies deal with the socio-political events of a given time frame and tries to find out the impacting theories, movements, personalities and incidents that has been reshaping a country's new structure. Through this process, it constitutes a frame of reference for the ongoing socio-political and econo-cultural trends for that particular country and nation. Although history never prophecies on the forthcoming life pattern of a country or nation, but its trainings help any theorist or scholar to carve out a futuristic model of that particular state. Therefore, it is imperative for any historical research to unearth the time-honored and enduring traditions of the country so that the scrutiny and evaluation of historical movements of a given time frame of a state do not miss the required correlates of that specific nation. While going through the Indian history of freedom movement, sometimes we are to disinter the perpetual codes of indigenous legacy that have scripted the cardinal philosophy for Indian struggle for independence. According to Swami Vivekananda, India is the land of spirituality. Irrespective of caste, creed, sex, wealth, religion, language, and geodiversity, India has always strived to attain the spiritual advancement. Indian life is thus anchored in its Upanishadic principles and mores. This has always educated the Indians from young to old that this physical form is the vilest prison of the world, always instigating scores of differences, Vedas, and thus creating a disagreement, squabble, and conflict among people, groups, institutions, and states. The central concept of identity and unity, which Vedas and Upanishads have preached through its sacred texts, has given the clarion call to the entire humanity to shun all sorts of variances and realize the all-pervasive consciousness in everything. Such an appreciation and understanding of the values of Upanishads can only make the people and the state attain the highest equality, rejecting all trends and systems of exploitation, hierarchies, and hegemonies. For this, every individual is required to reshape one's life through practicing the ideal of sacrifice, service, and contemplation. We should not fail to recall that the blessed freedom fighters of our country were enthused by these core values of our age-old spiritual tradition. The history of Indian political freedom struggle can never be dissociated with the thirst for highest spiritual wisdom, which has injected in the nerves of Indian nation the fascinating and enthralling stamina to combat against the physical body-mind complex. Thus, India needs to remember that all its efforts to win over the human world can never be earned through political weapons. Rather, it should strengthen and nurture the spiritual ambiences that it has been carrying down right from time immemorial. All our celebrations concerning this 75th Independence Day should reorient our aims, attitudes, and activities in such a way that we can move forward in understanding the meaning and purport of true freedom, from the physical battlefield to the mental Kurukshetra, from triumphing over the gross geopolitical world to comprehend subtle spiritual wisdom. In the Atharva Veda, there is a hymn named Bhumi Sukta, where the ancient shades prayed to Mother Earth for this spiritual wisdom. I'd like to conclude my talk remembering those unique lines on this great occasion of 75th Independence Day of our Mother India. Satyam brihattamugram diksha tapo brahma yagna prithiving dharayanti sadhu bhutasya bhavyasya patnyuktam lokam prithivina krinotu asangabadham badhyato manavanam yasya udvatah pravatah samam bahu nana birya oshadhirya vibharati Prithivi na prathatam sadhyatamana. Salutations to Mother Earth, the truth, Satyam, the cosmic divine law, Rhythm, the spiritual passion manifested in mighty initiations, penances, and self-dedications to the search of Brahman by the sages. These have sustained the Mother Earth for ages, who in turn have supported these in her bosom. She, who is to us the consort of the past and the future, being its witness, may she expand our inner life in this world towards the cosmic life through her purity and vastness. Salutations to Mother Earth, who extends unimpeded freedom, both outer and inner, to human beings through her mountains, slopes, and plains. She bears many plants and medicinal herbs of various potencies. May she extend her riches to us and make us healthy, both inner and outer. Jai Hind, Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Harihi Om Tat Sat, Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.
It is now time for the speech that we all have been waiting for. I request revered Swami Sarvapriyanandaji Maharaj to deliver his speech. As I have already mentioned, revered Maharaj is the head of the Vedanta Society, New York. And the title of his talk is From Political Independence to Spiritual Independence. Maharaj, over to you.
Revered monks, respected teachers, non-teaching staff, and dear students of the entire Narendrapur family. It gives me great pleasure to be with you, although virtually, on this most auspicious occasion. I offer my pranams to the revered monks and extend my namaskars and best wishes to all the teachers, staff, and students. I'm especially grateful to revered Swami Sarvapriyanandaji Maharaj, who is my dear brother monk, for giving me this rare opportunity and privilege to join you on this auspicious day. On this day, 15th August 1947, our beloved nation got freedom from centuries of colonial oppression by the colonial power Britain. On this day, we regained our political independence and autonomy, and this marks the beginning of a glorious new chapter in the history of our most ancient nation. This is political freedom. And of course, this is absolutely essential to the well-being of any community, of any society, of any nation. But is this all? Is political freedom the end of that? Professor Amartya Sen has developed this concept of a more comprehensive idea of freedom, this idea of 5 freedoms. The question is asked, what freedom is freedom from what? And the answer would be freedom from suffering, freedom from limitation, freedom to do what, freedom to be what. And the answer would be the freedom to live our lives as best as possible, to live the best possible life, however that we may define or understand that. So political freedom, of course, is absolutely essential. We cannot progress when we are under the dominion of an exploitative foreign power. But apart from political freedom, there must be economic freedom too. One must have the opportunity and the ability to work, to earn one's own living, to set up and carry on a business to one's liking and to develop that business and enjoy a materially prosperous life. Economic freedom is a must. Unemployment, for example, is a great restriction on freedom. There's no use having, say, for example, political freedom and the freedom to vote, whereas one is unemployed and starving. So economic freedom is an essential component of total freedom. There also must be social freedom. If society grinds me down, if there are restrictions, social rigidities, caste oppression, there is gender oppression, patriarchal oppression, in that case, one's freedom is seriously limited. One may have access to the right to vote, one may have access to a job, but if one's social life is full of suffering and limitation and under the dominion of somebody else, then there is definitely, we must admit that there is some lacuna in our freedom. So social freedom is another distinct component of total freedom. A third kind of freedom would be, Professor Amartya Sen says that transparency in our social and political and economic institutions. There are these vast government and non-government institutions whose functionings have an impact on our lives. So how do they work? The use of the funds, the inner workings of these institutions and their impact upon us. There must be transparency in this. There must be free press. There must be freedom of speech. Then there is also the importance of protection. Freedom requires protection, not just the usual protection of law and order, of course, that is most important, but also remedial justice. If my freedoms are violated, do I have recourse to speedy justice, a fair, economical and fast system of justice? There must be protection in terms of health, an affordable healthcare system. There must be protection in terms of social welfare, economic support. For example, if one does not have a job, or if one is unable to work because of maybe old age or disability or something, in that case, there must be some support structure, a social welfare network, which will enable one to have at least a minimally decent standard of living. So protection is another aspect of freedom. So Professor Amartya Sen has given this more comprehensive idea of freedom, not only political freedom, though that is very important, but also economic freedom, freedom from social rigidity, social freedom, transparency in public institutions, and a comprehensive system of protection. This is the concept of the 5 freedoms. Now, we may ask, suppose one can get these 5 freedoms to a great extent. There are societies which have achieved some of this, at least made progress in the, for example, the advanced economies of the West, here in the United States or in Canada, or in Western European nations, Australia, New Zealand, but also Japan, much closer to India, Singapore, for example, to some extent, in some dimensions. Now, the interesting question is, if one has this political and economic and social freedom, is that freedom? If I have the capacity to fulfill my desires to some extent, if I have the freedom to say what I think, if I have the freedom to do what arises in my mind, so is that freedom? Will that give me the freedom to live the best possible life? Will that free me from suffering? If one looks a little deeply, the answers are not easy, difficult to find. In fact, if you look at the examples of the best possible, the most free possible societies, like the United States here, for example. So are people here truly happy? Do they feel truly free? Do they feel that they are living the best possible life? Has unhappiness been conquered? Is happiness the dominant result of all these freedoms? The answer would be most unequivocally no. Even when I am able to do what I feel like doing, the question arises this: what I feel like doing, where is it coming from? Even when there are desires which I have got and I'm able to satisfy those desires to a great extent or to some extent, Does that lead to lasting fulfillment? Almost always never. The people who are partying a lot of the time here in Manhattan, they're very rich people, very famous people, people who are very competent and successful in their areas of life. Do they have lasting, profound satisfaction? To some extent, they're definitely happy. But on the other hand, they can still be profoundly unhappy in many ways. Satisfaction of desires does not lead to lasting fulfillment. There are still the problems of loneliness, meaninglessness, purposelessness. People suffer from a range of mental illnesses, depressions, unhappiness, existential ennui and boredom, and like this emptiness of life. And this is suffering too. The question arises is that these desires which arise in my mind, these thoughts which arise in my mind, these 5 freedoms which Professor Sen speaks about, this gives me the freedom to execute these desires in daily life. And yet after that, how is it that I'm still not profoundly, deeply, lastingly happy? How do I still feel restricted and limited? After all of these freedoms, there still will be old age, disease, and finally death, unavoidable, even with the best medical treatment available in the most advanced economies of the world. Still, old age will come. Disease will come in some form or the other. A doctor once told me in Calcutta that, Swami, with the advances in modern medical science, we can guarantee that you will live long, but we cannot guarantee that you will live well. If you live longer, it just means you are older for a longer period of time. You're extending the suffering of old age for a longer period of time. Old age, disease, and death are still there. And this is the ancient problem. Bhagavan Buddha, Prince Siddhartha becomes the Bhagavan Buddha by seeing these sights. He sees an old person, he sees a diseased person, he sees a dead body. And then the spiritual inquiry arises in him that these are inevitable in life. Even with all our advancement, even with political freedom and economic freedom, with social freedom, you still have these problems. Now, don't get me wrong. A society which has political freedom is much better, much freer than a society which is colonized, for example. A society which has plenty of economic opportunities is much better than a society which is struck by poverty, is immobilized by poverty and want and deprivation. A society which has a freer, where there are no social rigidities, there's more social mobility, where there is no caste oppression, there is no patriarchal domination, is actually a better society. A society which has transparency is better than an opaque, where the institutions are not transparent. A society which has a network of protections, health and economic protection and judicial remedy, this is a better society, no doubt. When we have these 5 freedoms, you have built a better society, and this is a worthwhile goal. Yet, it is important to note that this cannot be final. This cannot be totally satisfactory. At this point, someone might ask, is total freedom at all possible? Can one be totally free from suffering? Is it humanly possible? And the answer from our spiritual traditions is yes. Heinrich Zimmer, the Indologist, he writes, the philosophies of India are actually not pessimistic. Though they talk about dukkha and samsara and suffering, they are not pessimistic. They are profoundly optimistic, because all the streams of Indian thought, whether Orthodox, Hindu, or Buddhistic, or Jaina, they all talk about freedom from suffering, that the possibility is there for a deep and lasting spiritual freedom, which will actually give the result which we are seeking. Freedom, real, deep, lasting satisfaction, and freedom from suffering. In Vedanta, this is called Atyantika Dukkha Nivritti Paramananda Praktischa, the total and complete transcendence of suffering, and attainment of lasting, profound bliss or joy. This is the goal of spiritual freedom. Swami Vivekananda, it must be noted that he is really the prophet of freedom. When the freedom movement was gathering strength in India, all the great leaders in our freedom movement, whether it is Tilak or Sardar Patel or Pandit Nehru, Mahatma Gandhi, Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose, and many others, Aurobindo, and many others, they all were deeply inspired by Swami Vivekananda. By reading Swami Vivekananda, they were inspired to dedicate themselves to the cause of India's freedom. But not only this, in the writings of Swami Vivekananda, we find his ideas on social freedom and economic freedom. So this 5 freedoms that Professor Ramakrishan talks about, the germs of that, the core ideas are already there in Vivekananda. But the central message of Vivekananda is spiritual freedom. He says, each of the yogas is a path in itself to attain the attainment of total freedom. What is this total freedom like? Swami Vivekananda was fond of quoting from the Upanishads. Vedaham purusham mahantam aditya varnam tamasah parastat tameva viditva ati mrityumeti nanyah pantha vidyate ayanaya. I have known that infinite being, radiant like the sun, forever beyond darkness, beyond the darkness of death and sorrow and limitation. By knowing that infinite being, one goes beyond suffering, one goes beyond death. Tameva viditva ati mrityumeti. And there is no other path to the total cessation of suffering, to total freedom from suffering, to the total freedom of the attainment of lasting and profound bliss and joy. Nanya pantha vidyate ayanaya. So with all the political and social and economic freedoms, which are the signs of a good developed society, beyond that, one must have spiritual freedom. One may object that I'm quite happy with with earning a lot of money, with my family, with my occupations in life and my hobbies. Life is good. Why do I need spiritual freedom? But the thing is, even if you do not call it spiritual freedom, even if you do not use terms like mukti or moksha, what we are trying to do, all of us, if you actually look at what we are trying to do in life, we are trying to attain that only. Each of us in our own way, we are trying to overcome suffering in our lives, in the lives of those around us. Each of us in our own way, we are trying to attain fulfillment. We define it in different ways. We look for it in different things. We look for it in money, in pleasure, in relationships, in achievement, in power, in status, in knowledge, in art, in political movements. In all of these, we're looking for that fulfillment. And at the highest level, at the deepest level, this is what Indian thought calls spiritual freedom, mukti, moksha, nirvana. In fact, all of Indian thought, of Indian philosophy is this, the project is the attainment of spiritual freedom. The term is moksha shastra, Upanishads, Gita, the Buddhist, Jaina, Sikh traditions, all the Indian traditions are moksha shastra, are an investigation into the possibility and the practicality of attaining spiritual freedom. Swami Vivekananda classified all of these approaches broadly into his scheme of 4 yogas. And he says each of those yogas is a way of attaining spiritual freedom. Karma yoga. All our actions in an ordinary state, we all want that freedom, that happiness, and that overcoming of suffering. But the way we go about it is, we act for this little self. All money for this little self, all recognition and credit for this little self, all achievement, all friendship, all praise and acclaim uh, and long life and healthy life, everything is centered around, it orbits around this little self. Now, if this led to actual lasting happiness, very good, but it doesn't. It doesn't. It doesn't take long to see that all my efforts, all my lifelong efforts to make this one happy is not working. With all my political, economic, social freedoms, still am dissatisfied. I'm still unhappy. When I look for achieving certain goals in my career, in my personal life, even in my um, cultural and spiritual life, as long as it is related to this one little self, if I achieve it, there is still a sense of lack. If I don't achieve those goals, there's always frustration. In either case, the freedom from want, the lasting satisfaction which is looking for, is not attained. What Karma Yoga tells us is quite counterintuitively. Intuitively, we feel that all the work that we do for ourselves, that should make me lastingly happy. But counterintuitively, Vedanta tells us that when we work for others, that leads to lasting happiness. It is how strange is it that I want happiness for myself, and yet when I work for others, that happiness which I was looking for myself comes to me automatically. Swami Vivekananda says that selflessness, unselfishness, is actually more paying than selfishness. But it takes some maturity to understand this. It takes some time to understand this. The wise understand it quickly, and they engage themselves in something larger than the little self. And they get peace and satisfaction and happiness. Those who are not wise, they come to this understanding only through a lot of experience and suffering. Karma Yoga, where instead of working with attachment, instead of looking for results which will flow to myself alone, I work for something larger. And of course, at the limit would be working as a worship of God. The formula, the sutra, Shiva Jnani Jiva Seva, a worship of God in all sentient beings. Jivas are sentient beings. By serving all sentient beings, at least having this attitude that my actions are basically, I'm doing all this so that let it be of help to somebody else. Let some others benefit from this. Just this mental attitude and the action that follows from it, that is Karma Yoga. And that leads to satisfaction. One's own sufferings of body, of old age, maybe disease, maybe the looming death, all those become small and unimportant in the face of this overwhelming love and concern for others. At the core of Karma Yoga is the spirit. Swami Vivekananda calls it, he phrases it very beautifully, this unconditional love and service free. So love is not conditional. It's not that I love you because you belong to me, or you love me and therefore I love you. Not because of that. It's unconditional love. It's not love limited to one's own relatives or one's own family. It's not love limited to one's own community, religion, or race. It's not love really just for human beings, but for all living beings, and unconditional love. Whoever you are, whatever you may think of me, and however you may behave with me, my attitude should be of unconditional love. You may say this is illogical, this is not practical, but just think of it for a moment. Suppose we have this unconditional love for others. You will see the immediate feeling is of tremendous freedom, like a huge burden of selfishness lifted from our shoulders. You have a sense of deep freedom, of deep relaxation, unconditional love. And that unconditional love is expressed as service free. So service, all my activities are now at whatever level I can is service, is the worship of this divinity in all beings. This is Karma Yoga. Then there is Bhakti Yoga. I may not feel free. I may be subject to old age, disease, and death. But if I have faith in the existence of God, in an omniscient, omnipresent, omnipotent power behind this universe, and I have devotion and faith and adoration and surrender to this divinity, to God, by depending on God, who is entirely free and benevolent, I overcome my limitations. Freedom is attained through love. We love God, and through God, we love all beings. So in Karma Yoga, freedom is attained through selflessness. In Bhakti Yoga, freedom is attained through love. Then at another level, in Raja Yoga or Dhyana Yoga, freedom from the tyranny of one's own thoughts. You see, our minds are like petty tyrants, continuously chattering on in our head. And we think there is no escape from this. Thoughts are continuous throughout the waking, and in the dream, only in deep sleep, thoughts cease. Now, a freedom from this continuous chattering of thought, a freedom beyond, which is beyond the mind, that is what yoga promises us. In the deepest meditation, when you lose sight of the external world, even of the existence of the body, even the mind falls silent, there one finds an extraordinary freedom. The Patanjali Yoga Sutra says, Tada drashtu swarupe avasthanam. At that point, when the mind is completely silent, then you, the infinite consciousness, you are revealed in your true glory. Swami Vivekananda gives the example of a lake. Suppose there is a vast lake and it is waveless, no waves, absolutely calm. And the water is clean, crystal clear. In such a lake, if you look through the lake, you will find you can see straight through to the bottom of the lake. Similarly, if the mind is completely calm and the mind is completely clear, pure, to this calm and pure mind, one sees that beyond the mind, one's own existence, the self is not the body, not the mind. The self is beyond the mind, free of body and mind. Remember, problem in the world, problem in the body, problem in the mind also. But I am not body or mind. My reality is beyond body and mind. That is, Patanjali says, Tada drashtu swarupe avasthanam. The witness consciousness is experienced or remains, is actually experienced. It always remains in its true glory, but it is realized in its true glory in that state of meditation. Meditation is freedom. Meditation is true freedom from the tyranny of thought. Then, beyond all of this, beyond karma, beyond bhakti, beyond yoga, is jnana, the path of the philosopher, the path of the spiritual inquirer, that what is the truth? What is the truth about myself? What am I really? What is this world? And what is that ultimate reality, if there is any ultimate reality? So, this is the inquiry. As the Upanishad says, Tameva viditva ati mrityumedi. There is an infinite being, infinite existence, consciousness, bliss. And when I realize that, I go beyond all suffering. I attain true freedom, freedom from suffering and ultimate fulfillment. If there is that ultimate reality, by realizing that, how will I be free? By realizing that, how do I become immortal? By realizing that, how do I go beyond suffering? Because the realization of that reality means I am that reality. This is the core secret of Vedanta, that we do not know who we are. If we knew who or what we truly are, we would attain freedom. We would attain freedom from suffering. We would attain freedom from want. We would be totally fulfilled forever. We are that ultimate reality. Right now, ignorant of that, we identify ourselves with a mind which appears and a body which appears, and we get involved in this world which appears to the mind and the body. Swami Vivekananda says, one alone exists. It appears as nature and soul. There is one reality which appears as both subject and object. We forget that one reality, and then we are continuously involved in this play of the subject and object. Subject and object sounds very abstract, but it's just the way in which we experience the reality. I am the subject, and this is the objective reality. This is samsara. And this play continues. There is no ultimate freedom here, no release from suffering, no attainment of lasting fulfillment in samsara. It's only when we realize that one reality, which is right here, right now, and it is our own reality, when we realize that, then we attain freedom. We attain freedom from want, and we attain the lasting fulfillment which we are looking for. Dukkha nivritti, ananda prapti. And then in the Upanishads, in the Bhagavad Gita and the Brahma Sutras and all the Vedantic texts, various ways are given of pointing out this reality, who we are, what we are. There is the way of the inquiry into the 5 levels of the human personality: the physical, the vital, the mental, the intellectual, and the causal. The Annamaya and the Pranamaya and the Manomaya and the Vijnanamaya and the Anandamaya. And by inquiring into these, we realize that we are none of these, neither the causal nor the effects. Beyond the cause and effect, we are the witness consciousness, in which the cause and effect appear and play around and disappear. There is the method of the 3 states. In the Mandukya Upanishad, we find states of waking, dream, and deep sleep are discussed. Not that the Upanishad is interested or Vedanta is interested in waking, dreaming, or deep sleep, but using these 3, it wants to point out that I am that awareness in which these 3 are playing around. That awareness in which the waker is experiencing the waker's world, the dreamer is dreaming, and then finally there is the experience of deep sleep. All these 3 states come, play around and disappear back into me, the 4th, not the waker, not the dreamer, not the deep sleeper, but the 4th, the so-called Turiya, pure consciousness, which is none other than which appears as the waker, dreamer, and deep sleeper. So anyway, so that is the witness consciousness. There we are free. Not only we are free, that is freedom itself. As moksha swarupa, our very nature is freedom. Till now, we are thinking that we are beings seeking freedom, freedom from suffering. We seek it in the world, in political freedom and economic freedom and social freedom. We seek it in spiritual life through meditation and devotion and worship. But here now we come to the core idea of spiritual freedom, which is that we are already free. We need to know that we are free. Attainment of freedom is the attainment of the knowledge that we are already free. We always were free, we are free, and we will always be free unconditionally. When we realize that, then alone, when we look back upon this life, this world is there, and the body appears, and the mind of the personality appears, then alone we'll be able to live the best possible life, the life free of suffering, in the midst of suffering, yet internally we are free of suffering. Just like Sri Ramakrishna was asked by Hari Maharaj, and when Sri Ramakrishna was suffering from cancer, Hari Maharaj asked, "Sir, are you suffering very much?" And Sri Ramakrishna said, "Yes, there is this pain here, I cannot eat." And then Hari Maharaj said, "But sir, I see that apni to anande achen. You are in great bliss," which is a strange thing to say to a terminal cancer patient. And yet Sri Ramakrishna acknowledges that. He says, "Oh, the rascal has found me out." Which means even in the midst of suffering, of old age and disease and even death, in the midst of suffering also, that freedom is still there. It is unsullied. It cannot be affected by the appearance of suffering. Just as the desert is not affected by the appearance of mirage water. The sky, when it looks blue in the daytime, it does not actually become blue. Sky is not affected by the colors which appear in it or the clouds which pass through sky. Similarly, the Atman, our real nature, we ourselves are not truly affected by old age or disease or death. This freedom we must recognize in ourselves. This is the goal. We get this when we realize Aham Brahmasmi, Chidananda Rupa Shivoham. I am of the nature of pure consciousness. I am of the nature of Ananda. I am Shiva. So this realization comes through jnana, through the knowledge of our true nature. This is spiritual freedom. Here we attain finally the goal which we were looking for in this lifetime and maybe many lifetimes past, this quest comes to an end, to a fulfillment here. Life does not come to an end. Then we are living the life of the truly free. The term is Jivan Mukta, spiritually free life. Then we are living the best possible life that we can live. Then, of course, you can devote yourself to the grand project of bringing about political, social, economic freedom in society, creating a better society and helping others. Your life will be blessed and you will be the blessing to so many others. Isn't this a grand philosophy of life? Isn't this a project that is worthwhile in human life? I pray to Sri Ramakrishna, Ma Sharada, Swami Vivekananda. May they bless all of us. May this enlightenment dawn on all of us in this life. May we be all truly free in this life itself. And may our lives be blessed. May our lives be a blessing to many others around us. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Hari Om Tat Sat. Shri Ramakrishna Paramastu.
Thank you, Maharaj, for guiding us to be spiritually independent. I'm sure your words have touched the core of our students' heart. I now request the Vice Principal of our college, Brahmachari Shruti Chaitanya, to deliver a formal vote of thanks.
Om Jananim Saradam Devim Ramakrishnam Jagadgurum Padapadme Tayo Shritva Pranamami Muhurmuhu. As noted by our earlier speakers, today's Independence Day celebration is not just confined to acknowledgement and appreciation of the great achievements and success stories of independent India, but also an occasion to remember and pay homage to those who sacrificed their lives in the freedom struggle, to those who put country first before their own personal lives. Today is also an occasion for all of us to resolve to become better citizens, to imbibe those virtues exhibited by our freedom fighters, such as selflessness, courage, and forbearance. When these traits start manifesting in all of us, we gradually create better societies and eventually a better nation. One of the best ways to become better citizens is by striving for spiritual freedom. Today's keynote address was focused on this particular topic. Revered Swami Sarvapriyanandaji Maharaj beautifully elucidated the entire spectrum of freedom, starting from political, economic, and social freedoms on one end to spiritual freedom on the other end. He also summarized the means of attaining this freedom through the practice of the 4 yogas. These invaluable teachings are not meant for a single hearing, but should be heard and reheard and contemplated upon as much as possible. On behalf of the Ramakrishan Mission Residential College, Narendrapur, we offer our humble pranams and gratitude to Revered Swami Sarvapriyanandaji Maharaj, Minister in Charge, Vedanta Society of New York, for giving his valuable time and for his captivating keynote address. We offer our humble pranams to Revered Swami Sarvalokanandaji Maharaj, Secretary, Ramakrishna Mission Ashrama, Narendrapur, for delivering the welcome address. As aptly pointed out by Revered Maharaj, the youth has a vital role to play in restoring the lost glory of our motherland. We thank Professor Chandra Bhushan Prasad Roy, Head of the Department of History and Secretary of Teachers Council, for his thought-provoking speech. I am sure his candid talk, which was a reality check, will be pondered over by many of us. Our pranams to Swami Purnamayananji Maharaj for his mellifluous singing of the patriotic song. We also convey our thanks in advance to Professor Arup Kumar Biswas, who will render the closing song, which is an ode to our motherland. Our thanks to Professor Pranab Mondal for his crisp anchoring of the program. Our heartfelt gratitude to Brahmachari Ananda Chaitanya Maharaj for his laborious work in putting together this online video. Many thanks go to our staff who set up the light and sound system for our recordings. Finally, we would like to thank you all, our audience, for watching this Independence Day commemoration program online. Thank you, one and all. Hari Om Tat Sat Shri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.
We will now end today's program with a song presented by Professor Arup Kumar Bishwas of the Department of History of our college. Jai Hind.
ভারতবর্ষ সূর্যের এক নাম, আমরা রয়েছি সেই সূর্যের দেশে, লীলা চঞ্চল সমুদ্রে অবিরাম, গঙ্গা যমুনা ভাগীরথী যেথা মেশে, ভারতবর্ষ সূর্যের এক নাম। ভারতবর্ষ মানবতার এক নাম, মানুষের লাগি মানুষের ভালোবাসা, প্রেমের জোয়ারে এ ভারত ভাসমান, যুগে যুগে তাই বিশ্বে যাওয়া আসা, সব তীর্থে আঁকা বাঁকা পথ ঘুরে, প্রেমের তীর্থ ভারত তীর্থে মেশে, ভারতবর্ষ সূর্যের এক নাম। ভারতবর্ষ সাম্যের এক নাম, অস্পৃশ্যতা হিংসা দেশ ভুলে, কণ্ঠে সবার একতার জয়গান, ভেদাভেদ ভুলে বক্ষে নিয়েছে তুলে, দেবতায় দেশে মানুষ হয়েছে জানি, মানুষকে দেখি গণদেবতার বেশে, ভারতবর্ষ সূর্যের এক নাম, আমরা রয়েছি সেই সূর্যের দেশে, লীলা চঞ্চল সমুদ্রে অবিরাম, গঙ্গা যমুনা ভাগীরথী যেথা মেশে, ভারতবর্ষ সূর্যের এক নাম। অধিনায়ক জয় হে ভারত ভাগ্য বিধাতা, পঞ্জাব সিন্ধ গুজরাট মারাঠা দ্রাবিড় উৎকল বঙ্গ, বিন্ধ্য হিমাচল যমুনা গঙ্গা উচ্ছল জলধি তরঙ্গ, তব শুভ নামে জাগে তব শুভ আশিস মাগে, গাহে তব জয় গাথা, জনগণ মঙ্গল দায়ক জয় হে ভারত ভাগ্য বিধাতা, জয় হে জয় হে জয় হে, জয় 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 হে।